Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Snowden. I'm the director for the Cincinnati Area Baptist Association. With me today is Jerry Birdwell, and we're going to call this Jerry's Money Talk. And I appreciate Jerry being on. He has had a lot of great experience helping pastors, helping churches be able to be financially correct, right? And it's good to have his son on the line as well. Greg is the pastor of Providence Bible Fellowship here in the Cincinnati area. And Jerry has most recently been on staff at Liberty Heights Church at Liberty Township, just outside of Cincinnati as well. Jerry, man, it's good to have you here. And I want everyone to know that you are now officially available to all of our pastors and churches as one of CABA's new coaches, and helping them as one of our financial guys to do coaching on that level is really good. Hey, listen, as you've worked with churches over the years, Jerry, just go ahead and start off saying, just identify some of the issues that you see in finances, even record keeping or whatever as well.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks, Mark. It's great to be here, and even glad to see. It's always good to have the support of your pastor, and so I'm glad he could jump in and join us today as well.
So Greg's not only your son; he's your pastor too. That's cool. I love that.
That's true. So yeah. So anyway, it's always good to know that you have that support and encouragement. But
cool.
Mark, I guess in my area, if I had to go through, just talk about just in general things that you see that not necessarily problems, but just challenges. I think one thing, especially in any size church, but especially smaller churches, is number one, I think just a lack of good policies and procedures in place in the finance area, and really things that are not hard to accomplish or complicated in any way, but just those things that at least in my mind anyway are just kind of common sense things that can really give you protection and really assurance that your financial area is in good shape and working properly. And a lot of those things really is just as simple as just the procedures in terms of internal controls, and in other words, where typically in a small church you have the issue where there's really just one person that's doing most, if not all of the work in that area, and there's really no oversight or any accountability, so to speak, and that person's just really trusted to oversee and care for that area, and in the vast majority of the time that works out okay, but unfortunately sometimes it doesn't, and that's when the problems occur. But there's just a lot of just really easy things to do that churches can put in place that can just really go a long way toward giving you some peace of mind in that area.
Well, let me jump in there just real quick, Jerry, because we've had audits in the associational office every other year, and it wasn't until this past audit, and we passed with flying colors, but one of the things the accountant had recommended is that we have two people counting the money that we even pick up at the post office box. So I have my ministry assistant, and we have a lady that's one of the money counters at Cleft Pike Baptist Church near us, be able to come in on every Monday and every Thursday to sit down with my ministry assistant to help count the money and have that accountability. Can churches do that as well? I mean, is that something that would help them, or what do you see?
Absolutely. In fact, that was, that's just really fundamental. And it's really not hard to do. I've seen really for the most part where that's really can be a good task or a good assignment for the deacons.
Oh, okay.
One person there that's kind of got an administrative mindset. Well, just a fundamental rule is just that the offering, the monies that come in are ideally never alone in the possession of one person, but especially that the offering count is at least observed by a second person, and again, ideally it's done. In other words, it's fine because obviously most churches have a treasurer or someone who's ultimately responsible for that, and they collect the offering, they count it, they make the deposit. But at least on a rotating basis, you could have maybe your deacons that would sit in and observe that count. And if you've got a good summary sheet or a weekly statement there, they can sign off on that here's the total, here's the deposit. In other words, they're verifying or attesting to the fact that the account matches the deposit slip. And in other words, that there's just really a second set of eyes on it.
Right. Well, here's your chance. All right. What would you say to a pastor who does it all? And he is collecting the money. He's opening the envelopes. He's doing all the processing. What would you say to that one pastor? What are the things that he's exposing himself to?
Oh, well, I would first of all say, please, for your own protection, do what I'm talking about. I know when I went to my first church at Far Hills in Dayton, one of my last, it wasn't even a request, it was a stipulation for me to come on staff, was that they have an annual audit. And of course, the first question or statement I got back was, well, why do we need an audit? You're a CPA. And I said, well, I not only want it for your protection, but I want it for mine. Because obviously we all want to be above reproach and to do things with excellence. And really in a situation like that, I would tell any pastor, especially just for your own protection and for your own well-being and peace of mind, and because I know small churches and how difficult that can be.
Right.
But just to have someone sit in and do that would be just something I would highly recommend.
Well, now you mentioned having an audit. How do they get somebody to do that? Do they contact you, or they're not going to contact me? That's for sure.
That's true. I would be glad to help them through that situation. And really, we talk in terms of an audit, and the first thing you think of is, wow, that's going to be horribly expensive, and we can't afford that. But really, for most churches, a full-blown audit to me is not even necessary. But if you've got a knowledgeable person that can just come in on at least an annual basis, just to kind of overview and review things and just check a few key things that can make sure that things are being handled properly, and that in other words, that there's nothing nefarious going on that you're not aware of, those type things. And that can be handled quickly and not the cost, I would think would be probably something under $1,000 annually just to have someone come in and make sure the bank accounts are reconciled, that the giving records at least bear some resemblance to the bank deposits that that those tied to the general ledger, just some basic things, and to kind of do a review of your payables to see if anything jumps out there that doesn't look that looks questionable. Just a few key things, and
Sure.
someone can, like I said, at least annually, and do that, and boy, it can sure save you some heartache and in the future. And really, it you think, well, things like that could never happen to us, and that's probably true, but boy, it just seems like anymore, rarely a month goes by that I don't read about a church that's had an embezzlement happen, or a treasurer that's stolen funds. Just a couple of months ago, and I won't sit here and tell war stories all day, but just a small church, and I don't remember the location, but it's one of the surrounding states here. It wasn't in Ohio, but a typical small church with a longtime treasurer, volunteer who had done everything for the church, and really, bottom line, over a period of years, this treasurer had stolen $150,000.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh,
But the way they discovered it was their utilities were cut off
oh,
for non-payment, and so it was just a sad situation, and obviously you. Most churches have insurance, and so those losses are covered. But really, a couple of things. It does get in the press, unfortunately, and so it does damage your witness. But then also you come to understand in those situations that insurance companies don't lose money, and so if they do pay a claim, then your premiums are going to go up substantially because of that.
should a church keep their secretary or ministry assistant bonded? Is that what you recommend?
Absolutely, and even the treasurer, if you can bond even your volunteers, if your treasurer is a volunteer, and really in a lot of times your basic insurance coverages, your umbrella policy, your liability coverages will cover things like that, or should. But that's also a good way to make sure that person that's got responsibility in those areas can be covered, and that you're covered in case something like that should come up. But
if this is new, the idea of bonding somebody is a new idea to some of our pastors or financial people watching this. How do you go about doing that? Is that included in your insurance policy, or what's being done with that?
It can be, but sometimes it's separate and apart. And again, I can help you put you onto a good insurance agent, a person, and really it's all good in that area to find someone that's knowledgeable with church coverages. And I'm sure, Mark, you're aware of some as well that can help with that. And but that's really critical to make sure, because a lot of times you just assume that you're covered in those areas, and you're not. But they can certainly help you to make sure that there is bonding if appropriate, or in that your umbrella coverages are have you covered in that area as well.
I meet from time to time with our insurance representative, and we make sure that our policies are up to date. One of the things that we did here at CABA was double our liability insurance related to our block party trailers, and we went from $5 million liability to $10 million, and that increased our premiums, but we really felt that it was better than just discontinuing the ministry. We really believe in what it's been able to do to lead people to Christ and put churches in touch with many of the people in their community. But what about churches? How much liability insurance should they carry? I don't know if you've got a ballpark number. I will tell you this, Jerry, for our trailer rentals, we require a church to have a minimum of $1 million liability insurance. And that's actually made some of our churches, take out policies, which is kind of interesting. And we deal about 30, a quarter to a third of our churches doing the block party are not Southern Baptist churches. And so this is kind of new and it helps them along as well. But hey, would you recommend just $1 million, or in this day and age, does it need to be, more? Or
And a lot of times I just smile and say, pick the number that you feel like is adequate and then double.
Oh, then double it. Oh, okay.
But I would say just really a minimum of $1 million because boy, anymore, just what you would consider a small situation can add up in a hurry and
well, that speaks to the whole issue of risk management for a church. What are some of the issues related to risk management? I mean, if a pastor gets sick and is going to be out for a long extended period, that's one consideration. What if you've got some other financial crisis that hits the church? What do you recommend coming to risk management? What are some of the issues that you see a church should consider?
Well, of course, risk management covers a whole range of issues, but it kind of goes back to that thing that we spoke of initially in terms of just procedures that you have in place, and a lot of times, or if it works well, and those procedures are in place, then if one key person is out for some period of time, those protections don't go away. So that's really kind of another key reason to have those in place, because then you can kind of go through those what if scenarios and say, well, okay, what if this person is ill? What if, God forbid, something happens to them where they're just gone? And especially if that's not only the pastor, or if the pastor is the treasurer, but that person is I use the old story, if that person's hit by a bus and is gone on to glory, and nobody knows anything about what that person did, what happens then. And so again, it kind of goes back to that area of procedures that you have in place, and ideally, even in the smallest church, you've got some second person that's at least knowledgeable of what's going on in that area, and so it's not where you're just left with everyone standing in a room staring at each other.
Oh, no, I know how big important that is. We had a situation in a church I heard about where a brand new pastor had been in for about 2 weeks, and all of a sudden all the lights went off in the church during one of the work days, and he was in the office studying, and he came to find out the head of his finances had moved to Oklahoma and had been paying the bills while they didn't have a pastor for the past year. And he was waiting for the new pastor to kind of have a new transition. The problem is nobody was in the church to tell him there needed to even be a transition. And his mother was in the hospital, and he just forgot to pay the bill one month, and all the power went out. So the new pastor got that fixed, but I know what you mean. The risk management and making sure that worst case scenarios are in place, and those backups are so important there. It really is.
It can be something like that where it's just totally innocent and just somebody's over, but I think we could all agree that it's not the way to find out about those is not like when the lights go out Sunday
Oh,
hope, there's things in place where you can find out ahead of time and
absolutely.
address those things.
I don't know if there's any questions. I've still got a couple of more. Greg, I don't want to block you out of here, man, with this conversation, and I don't want to put
No,
you on the spot as well.
I don't really have any questions. I mean, I've grown up hearing this stuff. I could give a testimonial if you'd like, but
Yeah, sure.
well, I would say that, when we planted Providence in 2008, we had the benefit of having somebody like Jerry Birdwell on our speed dial, and for that reason, we were on a good footing as it pertains to all of these questions from the beginning. And now I'm just thrilled that CABA has available what we've had available for the last 13 years, and that is essentially free financial advice from a world-class mind. I mean, he really is. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody that knows more about this than he does. I mean, he's a CPA who specializes in church administration. So the fact that CABA is offering this is fantastic. And so, we've been able to avoid a lot of the common pitfalls that churches do because we've had him on our speed dial. And I would just say, if you're one of these pastors who's serving as the treasurer and doing things like that, give him a call, because this is not something that he needs to do. I mean, this is something he's really passionate about, and he's forgotten more about this stuff than any of the rest of us will ever know. So take advantage of what CABA is offering us. I can tell you from personal experience, I mean, we have benefited from it so much, and we've never paid a dime for it. And so that's what CABA is offering to everybody.
It is. We really are. We saw this as a great need, and when we heard of Jerry's availability, Jerry, I'm really glad that you're able to help our pastors, our churches, be able to have that financial advice that perhaps they would never have had opportunity to have before. And I hope that they can take advantage of it for this season of time. That's cool.
And I would say, just again, and not to say anything that was clearly objective of opinion about my home church, but really, if you wanted a model of how to do things appropriately from the beginning, you couldn't do better than Providence. They've done an excellent job, and really my involvement for obvious reasons has been minimal, but the Lord just has placed good, strong, key people in our church, and not only Greg, but Rick Jones and the other pastors there have just done an excellent job of drawing those people in and taking advantage of their expertise. And so we truly are a model of what a church should look like in this area. And again, just be able to know that things are operating well and you can sleep well at night, that sort of thing. But they've just done an excellent job from the get-go. And like I said, and that has very little, if anything, to do with me, but just their knowledge.
That's
and
cool.
Front, knowing how to get this. And that really, again, that goes back another one. I think it would be a good word to anyone that's thinking of maybe planting a church or starting a church. It's just so critical to get off on the right foot, and the beginning is the time to put these things in place, and really it's really easy at that point, and once you get off on the right foot, it's just easy to keep those things in place and going forward. And
Well, let me jump in and ask you about budgeting. We've got a lot of pastors, and especially in working with church planters, budgeting is one of the toughest areas that they have. They really want to have a strategy. They really want to know where they're going, but at the same time, do they have the funds to be able to back up what they see as strategic priorities. How do you do that in a church? What do you recommend for a pastor or a church going through a budgeting process that maybe just, Jerry, just one more thing, if they just year after year, they're working with the exact same budget, but yet their strategy might be something, or their needs might be something different, but they're afraid of touching this, sacred cow.
Right.
Budget can be.
Well, and a lot of times I think pastors can be intimidated by that budget process or that situation, or it's maybe one where, gee, we just don't have a whole lot of money, so there's really not that much to worry with. But really, it is a key critical area, and just some things really that biblically, I think that we're really even commanded by the Lord to give good stewardship over this area. And then to me, the budget is one of those areas. And small churches really face a lot of challenges in this area, because if you go to conferences or you read books, well, they give you these standard percentages of, well, this much of your budget should go to this, and your facility, and you shouldn't have this much more than this in personnel, and your ministries, internal ministries, X amount to missions, that sort of thing. But really, I think those are all good guidelines, but they're not written in stone. And I really think one thing is that you just understand that your situation is unique. And I think one of the first things that I tell, especially the smaller churches, is just, I know that really a lot of churches, obviously they have pastors that are not full-time, and they can't afford a full-time pastor. And so, but I think that really your first obligation is to care for your pastor as best you can, quote unquote, and to, in other words, to not cut that person short, or to have them struggle financially, especially if you have the means to do better in that area. But I think also the other thing you mentioned, it's just not good to every year to just pick up the last year's budget and pick up your eraser and change the date and say, here's our new budget. I think it's one of those things that would always require a good deal of prayer and a fresh look at each year, even if your finances are pretty well plateaued, but you need to think through those things. And I tell all churches, I'm from a budget standpoint, I've always been a fairly conservative. In other words, that I don't ever advocate that, and I'm sure you've seen churches as well, that they think, well, we think we're going to grow this much this year, and we're just going to trust the Lord for this 20% gain this year, and so we're going to budget this, and we're going to pray and trust the Lord to bring that increase. Well, I guess you can do that, but you can also end up in a real situation where you're in a lot of difficulty also. So I think there's a good balance there between trusting the Lord to provide, but also using a good deal of wisdom and common sense to do that in a realistic manner.
Well, let's jump in at that point, and we do have pastors that are faithers, and it's all about faith. But we want our churches not only to be good stewards, but we also want to see stewardship increase in the finances as well that we're talking about. I've heard the phrase called creating a culture of generosity. Have you heard that? What are some tips that you would have for pastors to create a culture of generosity in their church?
Well, to me, the very first thing, and of course, is to just not be hesitant or bashful to talk about money. The Bible has a lot to say about money, and it's a topic that we need to teach and to preach and to just not apologize for. I think the biggest thing that I've seen, I've served on at a large church or not there a large church, but a church staff in Texas, and of course one here or two here in Ohio, and the biggest difference I see is just that culture of generosity, and it's a lot of it is I think maybe cultural, but then a lot of it is I think just the hesitancy that a lot of times that pastors have to talk about this topic, and really just a great just by way of example, and not my church in Texas had the exact same average attendance on Sunday morning that Far Hills did in Dayton when I was there. The church in Garland, their annual budget when I left was $6.5 million. The budget, the highest it ever got at Far Hills was $2.1 million on the exact same attendance.
Wow.
And oddly enough, though, it creates other problems that we don't have time to talk about today, as far as when churches, quote unquote, have a lot of money, that creates its own set of challenges as well.
And abundance of resources.
But really, yeah, and just a more recent example, during the pandemic, during the lockdown, I know locally any number of churches here that have struggled because when they stopped meeting to much of an extent, people stopped giving or were slow in giving, and created issues for them that obviously weren't anticipated. Whereas at my former church in Garland, same thing. They were locked down for several months. Their giving stayed steady and even increased.
Wow.
A little bit over that same period. So
what were some of the things that they did? Did they just keep the money and the giving out there for the members, and they kept reminding them, or was it a strategy thing where they were saying, look, your money needs to go not just into this great big bucket that we can dip into, but this money is going to go reaching these people. This money is going to go to our children's ministry to give them a new check-in system. I don't know. Just
exactly. Yeah, I think that and really just too, it's not expensive or hard anymore to avail yourself of the technology of online or electronic giving. I think can be a huge help. And
so you can still worship through giving, even though it's online, and
exactly.
you don't have to necessarily wait for the offering plate to come by to put the envelope in. That can still be an act of worship.
Exactly.
Okay.
And,
all right.
Maybe Greg can speak to this, but I know Providence, at least, and had stepped up at least their technology in this area, through the pandemic time. And I know because I was one of the ones that took advantage of that. Before, I've always my preference was to physically write a check to place that in the offering, because for me personally, and it's just me, that was just a part of my worship, and I didn't want that to become something routine or just another bill that I paid, and so I always did that. Well, when things shut down, that was not possible. So I've been availed myself of the electronic means of giving, and so I think for a lot of churches, again, they may be intimidated or not understand how all that works, but there's ways to do that are very easy to put in place and are secure, and once that in place, and what I've seen over time is that for the most part that people like that and they appreciate that, especially the younger generation, and I think you'll see in a lot of instances where your giving actually goes up, or at least you don't lose in that scenario, and it helps really from a budgeting standpoint as well, because in the old days, if you will, the summertime was kind of your slump time because people went on vacation and they took their checkbooks with them, that sort of thing, but you don't see those highs and lows, if you will, because obviously people are able to keep that going even when they're out or not at church, that sort of thing. So there's any number of things that can help, but I think back to our first thing about just the culture of generosity, I think that's just really a thing where it's just a part of the spiritual maturity process, and as pastors, as church leaders, are just not willing to beat it to death, if you will, but also a situation where they're not bashful to speak about it. And then, Mark, to what you said a while ago, where people are aware that, hey, this is where our churches, this is where our funds go. When I give my tithe, I know this much is going to this ministry, some is going to missions, that I'm supporting my pastor, all those sorts of things. So
no, I appreciate it very much.
I think we're over a period of time, you just create that just by being purposeful and intentional in teaching it.
Greg, did you have online giving at Providence Bible Fellowship at the very beginning, or what process did you guys go through to institute it?
You mean at the beginning of the pandemic, or at the beginning?
No, at 2008 when you guys started up, did you guys have electronic giving?
No, we didn't. In fact, we occasionally over the years people would request it because it's just more convenient. But we resisted putting together any kind of paying through our church app or anything like that, because like Dad said, we prefer for it to be an act of worship. We would have people send in their check through their bank, and so we would get them in the mail that way. So some people did that, but then when the pandemic came, of course, we made it available for that reason. And I think it's possible, if I were to guess, because we resisted over the years and tied it so much to worship, that may be why we didn't see such a drop off in giving during the pandemic, because people tended to think of it as worship even when they were not able to come to church. I don't know if that's where you're headed, but
yeah, no, it's good to hear about that. We've had churches say that they went to online giving even before that because of blizzards and having to shut down church. And I've always heard a truism in church that any Sunday that you miss, you never make up the tithes and offerings of that. And I've always thought that was interesting. We had one of our larger churches here. resist going to online giving, and then they thought they would just do that and see how it would work, and the pastor forgot about it, and there was this a tornado that had ripped through their community, and they weren't going to be able to meet on that Sunday. And when they had their staff meeting, when they got back together again, one of the staff members said, well, 60% of all of our giving came in this week online. And all of a sudden, the pastor became a great proponent of online giving. Overnight, he became a real convert, and it's not been a problem since. And not only that, at this church, because of online giving in the middle of the pandemic, by August, they already had their full year receipts in by August, and it all came through online. So that was kind of a little bit of a win to me, and I'm glad that we could discuss this a little bit. And I think when you're letting churches know what's going on, it's important. There's one more thing. We've got just about 10 minutes left. One thing that I wanted, Jerry, to go to you about is talking about the personal taxes of a pastor. Talking to them, if you were going to sit down and work with the pastor related to his budget for his family, we've talked about budgeting with the church, but just his family, I mean, do all pastors know about housing allowances and, the salary being separate, and where do they get a tax break and where do they not? Can you talk to us a little bit about what a pastor should look for in their own financial budgeting?
Well, really, and you mentioned it. I think the number one thing for pastors is the housing allowance, and so again, that's just a key benefit that at least is there for now. It seems like it's constantly under attack by those that want to attack the church in general. So I don't know how much longer it'll be available to us, but it's there now, and it's a great help to pastors, and it's one that every pastor needs to avail themselves of, and then to do it properly. And there's ways to do that, to make sure that you take full advantage of that. And it's one that you really have to think through and do a little homework on to make sure that you're doing that properly. And then even on the church side, there's some things that are required of the church to properly put that in place for the pastor, where it would stand the scrutiny of the IRS if it ever got examined. And so there's the pastor side and there's the church side of that. But it's one that's there and can be it's
a benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
A great benefit. It's not cheating the government.
No.
The government set it up to bless the pastors.
Right. Tax avoidance is legal, ethical, and one that pastors
tax avoidance, we're legal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I say tax evasion is illegal. Tax avoidance is absolutely legal and should be done, because again, that's a benefit that's there for pastors to take advantage of, and really even if you have a housing allowance, it's also good to have someone that's knowledgeable to look at that to see, and I'm taking advantage of it, but am I taking full advantage of it? And I've seen any number of situations where the pastor had the allowance, but they weren't taking it to taking full advantage of it. And so there's just a lot of things that go into that, and probably way more than we have time to talk about today. But that's really one where I'm more than willing and would want to be available to help pastors with personal situations and to at least answer questions and help them walk through that. And for me personally, that's always at no cost to them. I'm that's just again, one thing that's always been a part of my ministry, if you will, even going back to my days on the other side when I was a practicing CPA. I would always be more than willing and happy to help pastors and be willing to do that. And so I'm just always available to do that.
Those were some of the questions that I had prompting you, Greg. I don't know if you have any others, but Jerry, or if you were going to do this today and you said, man, there's one thing I've got to get across to the pastors and the financial leaders in the churches, what would that one thing be that they've got to walk away with today?
Well, I think just the thing that I mentioned, maybe the very first thing, just if you've got just to have a system, if you will, in place that will survive you or survive any other key person. In other words, the structure, the system, if you will, in place that would do that. I think that would be my biggest admonition. And there's other things where I think churches are vulnerable. We talk about in that whole area of risk management and there's non-financial issues that you can get off in like in the area of background checks and with your workers, those type things that really should be done. But just in keeping with the financial area, again, I would just say what we talked about initially, and again to just say that it's not anything that should be difficult or expensive or onerous on you, but one of those things that once you get it in place and if you have someone in your congregation, a deacon or whoever who can kind of champion that within your church, that can not only make sure the procedures are in place, but they're actually being followed.
Right.
I think that's just a key thing that any church can do and really will go a long way toward making your life easier and simpler and help you to hopefully sleep better at night.
That's great. Any final word from you, Greg, before we close out here?
No, I'm again, I just encourage those who find church finances as much of an enigma as I do to ask an expert to help you out so that you can focus on prayer and ministry of the word.
All right. We'll put Jerry's contact information in the description of of what we're doing, and this will be a part of CABA's YouTube channel. Jerry, Greg, great having you guys on today. And Jerry, we'll look forward to doing some other stuff with Jerry's Money Talk as the time comes along, either maybe in a newsletter or here or other places along the way. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, guys.